to make a distinction between a university in Africa and an African university. A university in Africa continues the process of colonial education. It continues the process of colonial mental erosion of the African people to make them into good black people but with European values. But an African university must seek to produce an African academic whose point of departure is the reality of Africa, whose point of reality is the reality of the people in the township and in the ghettos, not as an object of academic research, but as people who live the reality of Africa. I want to call our speaker. He's a Tawa, he's an Africanist, he's a rebel. He defies the system. Maverick Thando Sipuye.
Can you please just allow me to be true to myself firstly, you know? I want to be true to who I am, true to my spirit. So, from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar, Azania, Africa. It was our tears and our suffering that nourished and kept him alive. Their law that killed him. Let no judges be sung, no shrines be raised to burden his memory. Sages such as he need no tombstones to tell of their fame. Lay him high on a mountain, that he may look on the land he loved, the nation he died for. Men feared the fire of his soul. When Dr. Don Matera wrote this poem, it was on the occasion of the passing of Prof. Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe. And every word that Dr. Matera said in 1978, when Dr. Sobukwe was killed, remains relevant today in 2019. It was our tears and our suffering that nourished and kept him alive. Their law that killed him. Let no judges be sung, no shrines be raised to burden his memory. Sages such as he need no tombstones to tell of their fame. Lay him high on a mountain, that he may look on the land he loved, the nation he died for. Men feared the fire of his soul. Sons and daughters of the soil, I greet you all in the divine names of our African ancestors, in the divine name of our African Creator, whatever name you call the African Creator, I greet you by that divine name. And I will be true to who I am, yet again. And so I will greet you in the name of the Almighty, Jah Rastafari. Yes, I. I've been asked to speak here on Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe and the law. And I'm going to present a case for the Africanization of jurisprudence in Azania. The purpose of this paper is to firstly foreground the unholy relationship between Sobukwe and the law in South Africa. Secondly, I want to challenge the racism embedded and inherent in the South African legal system, and to interrogate exactly what do we mean when we speak of African jurisprudence, or rather its absence in the current legal system. I want to also understand the role of colonial laws in the persisting oppression of African people today, including issues such as your land dispossession and other issues. Firstly, I'll look at the issue of jurisprudence. People tend to think that jurisprudence or the law are absolute and infallible. However, the architecture of jurisprudence is always relative to the epistemological situation of the crafters or the rulers of society, and also based on that society's ontological situation and reasoning. This means that jurisprudence is always informed by particular worldviews, value systems, and existential paradigms of a people. So jurisprudence or the law is not ideologically neutral, as many would have us believe. The law belongs to a particular community or communities, and it is largely constructed to protect the interests of the ruling elites and not the majority of the poor citizens. In essence, therefore, what we have to realize is that jurisprudence is about the exercise of power, the power to legislate, the power to arrest or detain, the power to prosecute, the power to convict. Jurisprudence, in its current configuration in Africa, is used by the ruling elites and oligarchs high up in the corridors of power to control and to modify the political and social conduct of those who are oppressed in our society. What we see, therefore, Africa, is that African people are the only people who are culturally, socially, and politically dominated, and yet we are free to legislate. We are free to arrest or detain. We are free to prosecute and convict on behalf of and on benefit of the oppressor. The law and jurisprudence, as it stands, reproduces global racist jurisprudence that is centered on the dominant white value systems. In South Africa today, Roman Dutch law is still the basis of the common law. Now, I think I'll end it right there and waste no further time on that issue. But I think it's clear what I'm saying there, Africa, that the law is not neutral as many people would want us to believe. And as I'm saying, when we speak of the law in South Africa, it is rooted in the culture of the Roman Dutch law. Now, I want to also emphasize that due to its Eurocentric nature, Roman Dutch and English law are largely patriarchal and misogynist, largely dominated by men who act as the police, men who act as attorneys, men who act as prosecutors, magistrates, and judges. And this is the culture. I want to emphasize that point, because it is important for us in understanding how the legal system continues to operate today. Now I want to move and speak about Sobukwe and the law. From the inception of his political work, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe challenged the jurisdiction of the racist legal philosophy. He identified jurisprudence, legislation, and law enforcement as key institutions to be challenged. Sobukwe understood that settler colonialism and the subsequent dispossession and the oppression of African people were not only instituted and legitimized through conquest, rape, and murder, but they were also maintained and sustained through the prescriptions of the law. According to Sobukwe, settler imperialism was instituted and perpetuated through judicial, legislative, and law enforcement institutions and agencies such as the police, the army, the courthouses, and the parliament. And throughout his life, Sobukwe had multiple encounters with the racist law. And I've identified 7 particular stages or encounters of Sobukwe and the law. And I want to just run through these 7 encounters of Sobukwe and the law very quickly. The first encounter was when Sobukwe was dismissed from General Secondary School. In 1950, he was appointed as a teacher at General in Standerton, where he taught history, English, and geography. In 1952, he lost his teaching position after speaking out in favor of the ANC's defiance campaign. And at that time, he was serving as the secretary of the ANC's Standerton branch. However, Sobukwe challenged his dismissal, and owing to the supreme prowess of his articulate arguments, he was reinstated as a teacher. The second encounter was when Sobukwe rejected the freedom cheetah. When the ANC adopted the freedom cheetah in 1955 in Cape Town, Sobukwe said, in 1955 the Cape Town cheetah was adopted, which according to us is irreconcilable conflict with the 1949 program of action, seeing that it claims land no longer African, but it is now auctioned for sale to all who live in this country. We have come to the parting of ways, and we are here and now giving notice that we are disassociating ourselves from the ANC. Close quote. After 1994, it is interesting to note that certain elements of the freedom cheetah were now incorporated into the preamble of the new constitution. The preamble reads, "We, the people of South Africa, believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity." Close quote. It is important to note that South Africa is a constitutional state with a supreme constitution and a Bill of Rights. The rule of law and the supremacy of the Constitution are fundamental concepts that are enshrined in the Constitution. So what we have today is a Constitution which says that the land that was dispossessed from African people through conquest, recorded conquest, African people fought several land wars of dispossession. At first, they were called the Kafir Wars, and then they changed them through the revisionist history. They said the Frontier Wars. Today, they call them the South African Wars and other names that they are trying to revise and sanitize them. But those were wars of land dispossession, where African people were fighting and resisting against the invasion of their land. You know, the invasion of their culture and so forth. Because when we're speaking about land, we're not talking only about land physically, but also land has a cosmological, a spiritual value in the African worldview. And this is what was attacked by white supremacy. This was what was attacked by the imperialist colonialists. The fourth encounter of Sobukwe relates to his incarceration at Pretoria Central Prison. We all know that on the 21st of March, Robert Sobukwe launched the Positive Action Campaign of the PAC, which was against the past laws. And on that day, Sobukwe and many of his colleagues were arrested. And in fact, he was to become a prisoner for the rest of his life, because Sobukwe never received his freedom ever since the 21st of March 1960. The fifth encounter of Sobukwe and the law relates to when he had served his 3-year sentence at Pretoria Central. And when he was a month about to be released, the apartheid regime through the parliament passed the General Amendment Act, which had clause number 4, which became known as the Sobukwe Clause. And you all know that that was a law that was instituted through parliament, and ministers of justice and others justified this law, saying that Sobukwe was a dangerous person. In fact, DJ Foster told Parliament that, and I quote, Sobukwe will have served his sentence on 3rd of May. He was firstly the leader of the PAC, and I can tell you, honorable members, that there has been no change of heart in him during the time he has not been in our midst. The government has to consider this matter, and the facts as exposed in the Snyman Commission report, that it would be failing in its duty of the facts or in its duty of the peaceful citizenry if it were to set this man free. This clause will be used to keep him there longer. I know the principle that here is a man who has served his sentence, but having regard to the circumstances, the government may decide that it is necessary for the security of the state to do so. And then Foster further revealed to Parliament that he had received a letter from Justice Snyman, which stated that Justice Snyman was the Chief Justice who led the investigation into the Poko uprisings that occurred in Paarl in 1962, where Poko men, or men of the PAC, led an insurrection around the Paarl area and other parts of Cape Town. And in fact, other parts of Eastern Cape, Kombashi, there were many wars in places like Komani and other places where the Poko uprisings took place. And incidentally, I think it's important to note that recently, the Minister of Defense, Mapisa Ngabula, even stated that most of the people who were hanged in at the gallows in Pretoria, 95% of the people who were hanged were Poko guerrillas or Poko members. And even right now, most of the exhumations that are currently happening, they're exhuming all of those people and giving them dignified burials. It is largely Poko members and PAC people who are being exhumed there. And I'm not saying it's exclusively them, but like I'm saying, the majority of those people are Poko members. So Foster stated and revealed that he had received a letter from Justice Snyman which stated that, I quote, "The PAC is a cancer in our community. I'm offering these comments because I think it can be exterminated, provided it is dealt with firmly. It should not be permitted to develop. Yours faithfully, J.H. Snyman," close quote. So, the Sobukwe Clause was renewed annually by the racist South African Parliament, and it was never used to detain anyone else. While he was incarcerated, I think it's important that I mention these points because really, when we speak about Sobukwe, we emphasize the history. People don't know about Sobukwe. He continues to languish in solitary confinement. You know, even in our national consciousness, in our memory, we rarely speak about it. I mean, even in institutions of learning, departments of law and so forth, other departments of language. Sobukwe was a language lecturer at Zethu University, and yet nothing is taught on Sobukwe in the language department. Sobukwe qualified and became an attorney and actually established Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe attorneys in Kimberley, and yet there is no law department or faculty that focuses on Sobukwe anywhere in this country. You know, Sobukwe attained a number of law doctorates and degrees posthumously, and yet there continues to be silence and marginalization around him. No one acknowledges him or speaks about him. So I think it's important that I mention these facts around Sobukwe. While he was on Robben Island, he obtained a degree in economics from the University of London. In 1964, Sobukwe was offered a job by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP of W.E.B. Du Bois, and the Montgomery Fellowship of Foreign Aid in the United States. He applied for leave to leave South Africa permanently with his family to go and take up that job offer. This request was denied by the Minister of Justice, John Foster. In his words, John Foster said, and I quote, "I decided that in the interest of South Africa, I could not permit him to go overseas," close quote. It's also important that I note that here, while he was on Robben Island, under that draconian Sobukwe clause, Sobukwe was poisoned and fed food with glass. And this was testified by Mama Sobukwe, Mama Zondeni Sobukwe, at the TRC Commission in 1997, where he testified about the circumstances of Sobukwe's slow poisoning while he was in prison. And Sobukwe, in fact, one of the reasons why he was released from Robben Island was because he fell ill. And the racist regime feared that this man would be martyred in prison. And then they decided to release him. But he was actually not released because he was banished to Khanyisile township under 12-hour surveillance or 12-hour arrest and banishment in Khanyisile township. And he could not associate with anyone, he could not associate with a group like this. He could not lecture, he could not teach. Sobukwe could not go and preach in a church. He was barred from any association with more than 2 people at a time. But also interestingly is that when Sobukwe was banished in Khanyisile township, he completed his law degree and entered his articles of clerkship with Howard Zondwagomba Van Zimande attorneys. And he was practicing at number T12 Nyambane Street in Khanyisile. After completing his articles and qualifying as an attorney, Sobukwe was barred from practicing law, and he was denied permission from entering the courts of law, except as an accused person or as a witness. On the 1st of March 1971, the then Minister of Justice, now it was Jimmy Kruger, he issued a notice prohibiting Sobukwe from attending any courts for the purpose of performing his duties as Nzimande attorneys. All right. So I can see that I'm almost out of time, so I'll move forward to my Africa from that one. But what I want to emphasize there is that Sobukwe practiced law, qualified as an attorney, was denied from practicing law and so forth, but finally challenged all of these racist restrictions against him, and he finally qualified and practiced law. He established his law firm in 1975, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe Attorneys. And it's a shame that today, the law firm of Robert Sobukwe is an indictment actually on the conscience of this heartless nation, because it lies abandoned in ruins. Although the government declared it a heritage site, there is no memorialization or preservation of that institution in Kimberley today. It's a shame on this nation. And then, the last encounter of Sobukwe relates to his death in Africa. Like I've said, when he died, he received a number of posthumous honors. And I do want to just mention a few of them before I sit down. The first one was the Doctor of Laws, which was awarded by the University of Ahmadu Bello in Nigeria on the 16th of February 1985, 7 years after Sobukwe's passing. The second one was the Doctor of Laws, which was awarded by the University of Fort Hare in 1998. The third one was the Doctor of Laws, awarded by Zethu University in 2003. And then the fourth one, Doctor of Laws, was awarded by the University of South Africa, UNISA, on the 20th of October 2015 in Africa. So I just want to say, in closing Africa, it is important that we reflect on Sobukwe, not only as a political activist or the founder of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, but also his multidimensionalism, his many other aspects. And it is important that we use Sobukwe's philosophy, his Africanist philosophy, to interrogate the epistemology of the jurisprudence that we use currently in Africa. And with those few words, give thanks.
Why is it that in our curriculum, including in legal philosophy, we are comfortable to quote Hegel, Hart, Marx, and we have been made to feel guilty when we quote Steve Biko, we have been made to feel guilty when we quote Sobukwe, Nkuruma, Nyerere, Lumumba, and Sankara. What is this that people fear so much about those that look like us, that they do not want them in the academic terrain? They want their voices to be silenced in academia. The task and theme say to us, if you go to your program, curriculum transformation, Africanization, and decolonization. The challenge before us guests, students, academics, and all of us is immense. And Ngugi wa Thiong'o had this to say: why did Africa let Europe cut away millions of African souls from the continent to the four corners of the world of the winds? How could Europe lord it over a continent 10 times its size? Why does needy Africa continue to let its wealth meet the needs of those outside its borders and then follow behind with a hand outreached for the loan of the very wealth it has gone? How did we arrive at this? That the best leader is the one that knows how to beg for the shares of what he has already given away at a price of a broken tool. Where is the future? Close quote. Universities in these countries serve only one purpose: to tell the students that they must become model students and model citizens, be like those that produce them, to talk like those that produce them, to have an accent like those that produce them, and therefore they would have been achieved the level of education. If you defy those that produce you, you do not qualify. You are not educated. And I'm saying that Xolani Dube will take us through this process and will also educate. Thank you.
Let me greet everyone who is here, and also let me extend my profound appreciation for the invitation especially from David on behalf of UNISA, as well. Also, let me appreciate the fact that you came and you have honored the invite, and you are willing to sit and hear this individual trying to make sense in front of you. And so when I don't make sense, please bear with me. I am trying to make sense. I wrote the paper, and the title of the paper is South Africa and the Problem of Nationalism, Notes on the Making of Multicultural Modernity. And the paper was speaking to the invitation that I received from UNISA. And also, it happens that in South Africa we're also having, inverted commas, what we call it as xenophobia. And so I think that the paper is also appropriate to be read in that particular context. I'd like to, I'm very intimidated. Since yesterday I came here. When you come into a forum of inverted commas, the Africanist, you are always intimidated, because if you say something that is not in line with them, they can pounce at you. And so I'm very scared, It's like attending in other parts of the world, if you attend a Nazi or a Nazi gathering and then you say something that is anti-Nazi and then they will pounce at you. It's very scary. But I think what we are here for is the issue of us trying to really understand our position in the matrix of power, and also to try to understand what is this meaning of identity and the issues of African scholarship in a global context. I wrote this paper based on the issues of the South African Constitution. And you write a paper and then what you present is also totally different from what you wrote. That's the problem. And I said there are some ambiguities in the constitution of our country. First and foremost, what we have to ask ourselves, whose constitution is this? Is it a liberal bourgeois constitution, or a mission statement, or is the constitution of the native, who are just colloquial here in South Africa? And so whose constitution is this? In a utopian perspective on constitution, it's supposed to be a tapestry that's neat and ossified, the shared values, norms, the mission of any country or a nation. But you cannot have a constitution if in a country that is not a nation. And so the most important thing that we have to ask ourselves before we talk about the constitution, the identity and so forth, are we a nation? We have different scholars who talks about post-national constellation at this time. Are we a nation? And if we are a nation, what defines this nationhood? Is it defined by the skin pigmentation, or is it defined by the shared common interest, or is it defined by what I can say, to romanticize our past on the issues of who we are or where we come from? Hence, we talk about Africanism and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, South Africa is a social construct. South Africa, nationhood, is a social construct. Who constructed this so-called South Africa? Obviously, we have to understand that South Africa, or the so-called, the construct of South Africa never started in 1994. It goes way back. Those who know history will agree with me when I say the so-called inverted commas, the colonial settlers, defined who we are, and through their education, they made us to be what we are even today. And so, meaning that the South African identity is premised on two pillars. It's trade and politics. That's why other people, they talk about the politics of identity. And others, they say South Africa is not a country, but is a trade station. And its position in terms of the economic structures, if you look at it, according to Afrca, there is what we call it the core, there is what we call it the periphery, there is what we call it the semi-periphery. And so South Africa, its position, and the way it has been constructed as a trade station in Africa, it is a peripheral country. It is a semi-peripheral country because it connects the core and the periphery. And so the issues of identity in a trading station or in a semi-peripheral country is an elusive one. Let me repeat this. The issue of identity in a trading station or in a semi-peripheral country is an elusive one. Why I am saying that? We need not to romanticize our past. We need to confront it so that we understand even the meaning of this constitution. Those who know history, South Africa, as I said, there was no South Africa until the so-called the natives were defeated. And so, who came with the concept South Africa? The colonial settler, after they defeated the natives in this country. Let me repeat this. South Africa is a political construct. And on top of that, there was no South Africa before. The so-called the nation South Africa. What we had before, we had different kingdoms and different nations. That's the reality. And so this homogeneous construct that is, most of the African scholars are trying to bind it through academics and political ideologies is a plastic one, is an elusive one. Because it's not based on the reality. The colonial settler, in a brutal way, intervened and disrupted the natural evolution of the natives in South Africa. That's why when they arrived, when we talk about the wars of South Africa, we talk about the Zulu wars, we talk about the Xhosa wars, we talk about the Tswanas and so forth. Because the reality is, when they came here, they fought in different kingdoms. They never fought a one united black nation. That's why even in the ANC in 1912 when they met, they were saying blacks must unite, tribes must unite. And so that unity that the ANC was dealing with, it was a political unity, it was not an natural and evolutionary one. And so it's very problematic if we sit here differently coming from our own tribes and try to find our unity through Marxist ideology.
that will mean there is a gap in our natural evolution, us as Africans. Therefore, even this constitution, when you look at it, is not talking about the natives, the dispossessed. It's at the tertiary level. Because those who came into South Africa, the Afrikaners even themselves, they were not a homogeneous group. There were French Afrikaners, whatever, they were not homogeneous. So as well as so-called whites. That's why they claim themselves to be Europeans. They were not homogeneous. But these two groups, they shared a common interest. What was their common interest? Is a capitalistic interest in this country. That was their common interest. That's why they managed to divide themselves to gold, as others they went into tertiary, trade, of which is agriculture and so forth. That's why even today, South Africa, when you talk about the so-called black cobra bourgeoisie, the ANC is trying to fit in this interest of these two protagonistic common interests, the Afrikaners and the Europeans. Those are the cleavages that we have in this country. And so I always find it difficult that if Africans were disrupted and they missed a particular stage in terms of human evolution, because human evolution is periodical, meaning that it's like those who have done psychology. Human development has got 8 stages. Africans, the reality is, we missed that stage of developing ourselves into a nationhood or into a nation. And so it will never happen. That's the question that's the reality that you have to accept. It will never happen. A classical example, when you talk about the expropriation of land without compensation, that's why in KZN, the Ngonyama Trust and the Zulus are saying, no, you can't come and take our land. It's not the land of the Tswanas, it's not the land of the blacks, but it's the land of a particular tribe. That's why in Northwest, the Bafokeng tribe, they have their own platinum, and it's supposed to benefit its own people, not the Zulus, not the Xhosas. That speak to the fallacy of this plastic unity and black nationhood that we have in this country, that we need to confront. And so, now, when we talk about this constitution and Pan-Africanism and what we call it, we call ourselves African scholars. From which perspective do we intervene? On whose behalf are we speaking? Are we putting every nation or every tribe under one basket in South Africa, and then we claim that we are a one nation and we are blacks? Those are the realities that are starting to confront us as we are also dealing with the issues of xenophobia. And so, what I would like to say, as I've said, in the South African context and its constitution formation and its nationhood formation, it has gone through stages. There was a stage where tribes of South Africa, different tribes or different natives in South Africa, never came together and formed one African nationhood. It was only then, when ANC met in 1912 or in 1906 in what we call this place in Bloemfontein. That's when the so-called the African tribes started to talk about unity.
And this was a political unity. And this was led by the petty bourgeoisies of then. And so the voiceless never had their own conversation. Even in Kodisang, it was a political elite conversation. And so my parting shot is a very simple one to the scholars that are here. Can we go back and redefine our literature? And a very painful past that where we come from, where we were forced to be silent about that past. Can we really discuss about how these different tribes here in Africa all of a sudden can belong as one and claim to be Africans and claim to be South Africans? And we have to ask ourselves, if we say yes, a Xhosa and a Zulu and so forth, there was no disruption, all of us, we are South Africans. What binds us? What makes us to be one? Is it political bindness, or is it a natural one, or is it us sharing the common interest? If we are sharing the common interest, what is that common interest that we are sharing? That is very important. And so that in future, we are not going to debate in an embarrassing manner. You can come. When we see people moving from hostel, and then we see people say those are Zulus, are not South Africans, you know? When people are moving from hostels, we know that, no, these ones are Zulus. Are those people in the hostel not South Africans? Are they not representing us? Those are the privileges, those are the false dichotomy. Those are the falseness of our nation as we claim to be South Africans. Thanks a lot.
We must remember Samora Machel as we seek to build a nation, who said to us in his speeches, in order for a nation to rise, a tribe must fall. We must seek to say, who said to us, we are black, we are Zulus, and we are Tswanas? Who said this to us? Why is it that as the indigenous people of Africa, we are not referred to as an African people, and a foreign settler colonial people and their descendant has usurped our identity and called themselves Afrikaners? Because Afrikaner is nothing else but an African. Why is it that we are defined by the color of our skin, except for the origin of our existence? We have nothing and nowhere else to go. We only have Africa and Africa only. Those that live will always come back. We cannot live. We seek not to leave our continent, but to say our education, our existence must reflect our reality. As young people today, as we meet with academics and have a discussion later on, we must ask ourselves, what have we become since 1994?
Why does it stop?
And I insist on this point. I say South Africa is nothing else but a federation of tribes.
Because I went through.
We are a region and a country which is federated by tribes. And those tribes include the descendants of the European settlers. It includes white people because there's nothing unique about them. They've usurped our identity, but in Europe they remain as the French. The French are a tribe. They remain as the English and the Swedish. They are a tribe. They remain as Germans and Portuguese. There's nothing special about them, but the Portuguese tribe, the French tribe, the Italian tribe, and the German tribe. And therefore, as we seek to define ourselves in this forum and going forward, we must say one thing which is very important. South Africa must fall and Azania must rise. Our first speaker said and went on and on about the 1955 document. I don't want to mention it. the president of a certain organization, Chief Lutuli, in his biography says, I do not know who compiled that document. In fact, I saw it for the first time in Cape Town. You can go and read his biography. He says, I do not know who were the authors. As the President General, I saw it for the first time, as it was being read in Cape Town to those that gathered there. But what we know is that this country has spent more than 300 years of struggle against the system. The question is, what was that struggle about? Are the African people vindictive and hateful? The answer is no. The African people are a caring people that embrace those that are stranded, feed those that are hungry, house those that are homeless, and even give them land to farm and stay amongst them. In fact, the popular narrative says the first settlers in this country came in 1652. But historical and empirical evidence says no. In almost 1420, in a place roundabout called Port Elizabeth, in the stormy seas, a ship carrying Portuguese was wrecked. Those that survived swam to the shore of the present Eastern Cape province. They settled amongst the Xhosa-speaking African people. They intermarried with the Xhosa-speaking African people to an extent that when their fellow travelers came along and said they must go back to their native land, they refused. And they were happy to stay amongst the African people who had not disrupted them. Because in their minds, they were not there to conquer. They were there as travelers around the Cape, on their way to collect spices. That is different from those that would follow them later, who came with a colonial mind on behalf of the European merchants and business community in the form of the Dutch East Indian Company. That is the colonial history we are told. We are also told they did not find barren land. They found a people there. And that people was an African people. They traded with them. They exchanged goods and food until those that came with the sea and the wind demanded more for free. And the source of conflict. They demanded more land and they needed labor, and the African people refused to labor for them for nothing. Now, I want us to define our journey of struggle. To say, Dr. Lichfield and her peers were prepared to die. They left this country for different countries, for Angola, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania, Uganda, and many others, with the sole purpose of getting military training and come back home to fight. The question was, what was that object of struggle? Did they want the right to get married to the other people? Or was it the right for the restoration of their object which has been taken by force? If you read the Constitution of South African Native Congress of 1912, not the one of 1955 at Khanyisile. If you read the program of action of 1949, which was adopted in the conference in Bloemfontein, it talks about self-determination of the African people. And as Dr. Tshabalala is ready to come. So, okay? I'm told it's Professor Cakata who must come. As we prepare to listen to our beloved Prof, we must ask ourselves what was the object of struggle. Was it a right to vote? Was it a right to have neighbors from Europe? Was it a right for our kids to speak English through their nostrils and negate themselves? Or was it a right to have an object of struggle restored? And for 300 years, the African people fought for nothing but the land. And until the land has been freed, we remain tenants in the land of our forefathers. We remain in a democratic state where 81% of the land, 25 years almost after democracy, still remain in the hands of the settler colony and their descendants. And therefore, Professor Cakata, come and educate us on Afrocentricity and decoloniality.
I'm going to go ahead and invite my maternal ancestry. Anzonamkela isifele zakulobanga amabanga obhodlinja othandana. Isifele zikamakhulu wami amangwevu oZulu ozikhoma umhlatshana. Sithi ngamangwevu izinhloko zabo zingwevu. Lulwazi nenzululwazi yesintu cama. Sithi ngamangwevu kuba babehleli bekho kwandulo camagu. Ohudulu, omaga, omanzamnyama camagu. Into esifaka inyama emlanjeni iphuma ivuthiwe. Othandwa mhla kukubi. Sikhala kubo namhlanje kuba kubi. Sicela indlela kuni zilo zomlando. Molweni. Siyanibonani. So to law UNISA, the very important law faculty in Azania today, we do not say thank you to medicine as African people. Americans say we'll be jinxing you. So they are talking today because you're onto something. Never in the history or in the story of this country have they ever thought that a law faculty would speak like this and have such a platform as this. So my So my talk today, which was clumsily constructed, but that's how I work, is praise poets as wells of African epistemologies. And I'm using the poetry of Utatu David Yalimanisi, who is a Xhosa speaking poet, who since transitioned in the 90s. But let me start by saying my parents named me Zethu, because they believe that I am the child who will claim things. Dizolanda izinto zethu Africa. I am here to lay a claim. Children, the African children, and to feed them with the knowledges of our ancestors. I use poetry to do that because it is my refuge, especially when I'm faced with pertinent questions such as this one, and especially at this moment of Azania rising, where we are faced with an enormous task of effecting meaningful change. We're not rebranding academia. We're not rebranding they call it higher learning. We are not. We are turning it to the source. This task is enormous today because our children depend on what we do today about this education system. So when the speakers of Isinguni languages say Inyati ibuzwakaba phambili, they mean that someone has stood exactly where we are standing today. And to me, the Imbongis of Tonyama, what in English they call oral poets, have stood exactly what we are standing today. And oral and poet doesn't even describe what abantu mean when they say Zimbabwe is Umthonyama. Umthonyama is the soil. You can call it manure. That means Imbongi Umthonyama is the person who arises from the ground, just like any other plants. We are plants, we are emerging naturally from the ground up. So Imbongi Umthonyama are those people because they speak without inhibitations. And also they speak from a place of honesty, because not what they do now in higher learning where they will teach you creative writing. Our people long before the colonizers came were creating words. They wake up with words. That call at 3 o'clock which says wake up, and you have these things to say that you can't even explain where they come from because our ancestors are speaking through you. So I am currently exploring the works of praise poets, Imbongi Umthonyama, that lived and are negotiated around the colonial era. So currently when I was invited for this talk, I was reading Udata David Yalimanisi. While I'm not going into details of his interesting personal story, because he was booted out of Lovedale. Remember Lovedale, that colonial missionary institution that educated most of our leaders. So Udatumalis was booted out because in the middle of the night, they started singing poetry naturally. As a poet or as an African, you respond. So he responded with his carrying his nobkiri and performing in a true Africanist fashion. And the students were moved. He says they moved from dormitory to dormitory following them as they are performing this poetry. And it was too disruptive for the establishment. They had to put him out. So I'm not going to go into other of his activities because of time. But what got me thinking is something he said in one of his oral pieces that made me think about what exactly do we mean, or what exactly is an indigenous education system, especially for the people of this part of South Africa. Imbongi are considered Amanyanga, the ancient souls, those that are older, those that are lived. So we group them in the same category as the elders and as the healers. So poets were our healers. I don't know if they still are today because there is a lot that colonialism did to what we think and how we think it. But Imbongi, those that are not Western school trained, are actually our healers. So why would our ancestors want us to learn from such people? Because indigenous African education is a very distinct thing. You cannot learn from people you do not know. You cannot be taught by someone who doesn't know you. As you can see with Amasiko Etu in our homes, they are most of the time conducted by the elders of your family because they have to know you. In psychology, they say you build a rapport with your client. But how do you build a rapport with somebody you do not know or whose existence you are dismissive of? So in Africa, we do not build that superficial rapport. We build meaningful rapports where you've got that. That's why in a village, you never find a single household that is not known by the entire community. Because in order for you to help the community, you've got to build a meaningful knowing of who is amongst you. They must know who your ancestors are, because that will relate in how you together treat the land. So we are talking about that kind of an education system that relies, and not just anyone is qualified. Unlike here, when they can teach me how to conduct research, and I spent a few years acquiring a PhD, and all of a sudden I can teach other people's children. Whether I have a loving heart or not, whether I care about whether they came to school having eaten or not, I will teach them, because the system aina buntu. that elevated type of an education system, an education system that cares about the human in front of you, that wants to know whether or not you are well, which is the true psychology of a people. So what is it that Khanyisile said that I wanted to share with you? So in a recorded interview with Jack Auckland, who is a white person who was left to inherit the history of praised poets Zamaxhosa at the university currently known as Rhodes University. So he has all these recordings of him and his father following praised poets. And when in 1971, in February, he followed Khanyisile. He sang, in an interview, he just rendered this poem. Siyambulela umuntu esenzela imbadu. Sibulela amanyange akowethu. Ukusivisa ngembali zamanyange. Kuba sasihleli emnyameni singazinto. Sibe kambe siluhlanga likamthetho kamthetho nzima. Singabantu bezithethe namasiko abo. For those who don't speak any Nguni languages, it's translated as, we thank the person who brought us the history. We thank the ancients of our land for telling us tales of our ancestors, for we lived in darkness knowing nothing. When we really are a people of law of laws, of the law that is strict. We are a people with customs and ways of their own. What intrigued me most about these poems are the last few lines, which I believe they are engaging with an epistemological question. That Khanyisile is rightfully making knowledge claims, that as African people we've always had our own ways of knowing, that those ways are ancient and supreme to us, because a law can only be supreme to its own people. We don't impose our knowings to others, but they work for us. Perhaps it is important to remind ourselves that those ways refuse to die because they are still nestled in our languages. When Khanyisile says umthetho kamthetho, he made me think about the very word umthetho, which is law. NgesiXhosa sithi ngumthetho, and as you can see, it's derived from the word ukuthetha, meaning to speak. So what is umthetho? It means that people have deliberated on what is right for that particular community. Bathethile abantu. It also means that African people have engaged in a philosophical exercise because you don't agree into a law unless we all deliberate. And they say in those deliberations you won't even know who is superior, who is what is the other inferior, because they would have sat in a circle and take turns as equal. Bringing us to another word which is very important, which is isikhundla. Isikhundla comes from, and we call courts inkundla. So the important word inkundla, it comes from isikhundla. Everybody has a seat in the philosophical deliberations, this philosophical understanding of creating laws for the community. As you can see, it's not discriminatory. It has nothing to do who has money, who has livestock, who has material possession, but has to do who has meaningful contributions that will help the nations prosper, and also to diffuse disharmony, because an essence of African life is to be harmonious with the land and with the people. We are a people who believe in African harmony, that the laws that we create should apply in the ways we treat nature. So what I'm trying to say here is that language is very important. Nobody could have a language if they didn't have knowledge. So the colonizers found us here practicing our knowledges. Yet in higher education, they pretend as if we sat and waited for them to actually tell us what law is. What are we doing? What are we doing to deal with our communities, to make our communities work? What are we using our words for, if to not create the philosophies? When Utatumani's says law of laws, what is this law of laws? This supreme overarching law, if it's not Isintu, which are the principles that are based ebuntwini. So all of our laws, banesintu. As you can see, inkundla, laws begin within a household. Inkundla ngasebuhlanti. It's where we call it inkundla ngesixhosa, meaning that these deliberations started at a household level. So by the time you go to the community, you already have a sense of how to behave, how to be amongst other humans, among nature, among the galaxies. So it is that kind of law that Utatumani's is asking us today to pick up. A law of strict ethics, where poverty and opulence do not live alongside each other. That should be law. So today, we should actually, something we should have done a long time ago, declare South Africa lawlessness, actually lawless. Because how is it that poverty and opulence can live alongside each other? How is it that a person who helps you, how is it that the people who are helping us here cannot even taste the food we're eating? That is lawlessness, my Babane. It shouldn't be. It is a law of its own welfare systems. We come from a law that defines to us what is welfare. When we say Ilima, which is a system of coming together as neighborhoods, helping one another during a plowing season, that is a welfare system. When we say Inkomo Yenqoma, which I like very much because it speaks to two things: how to be a good citizen, how to be a good neighbor, because Inkomo Yenqoma is on the principle of a milking cow. I'm sure my sisters would have talked about it yesterday. What it teaches us that you cannot go to bed full while your neighbor is hungry. It is lawlessness to do that. It is outside of African principle. But what also it teaches us as receivers of goodwill. If I am the one who has lent a cow, it's an ethic of being true to those who help you. Work so hard that you build yourself up and you return it. So that is a welfare system that holds both the giver and the receiver accountable. That is a law that we should appreciate because it's a preventative type of a system which prevents conditions that would breed criminality. Because if you do not take care of your neighbor, they will steal from you. Unlike the current law system, when it's okay if you don't take care of them, they steal from you so that you put them into jail. We do not have that kind of a system. Prevent the conditions that will make people steal from you. Because we know that it is a system which even holds the receiver of goodwill accountable. So as you can see, our laws are not based on a system of charity, where it's enough that you give them a soup in a mobile soup kitchen. What will you do to them tomorrow? Will you still give them? Will you cancel your holiday so that you make soup every day to feed the homeless man? An African law system doesn't do that. It is a welfare system that makes sure that a person is better able to be in a position to support themselves, because the dignity of an African is based on your ability to actually be able to do things for yourself. We find also this law applies to other disciplines. As you can see, law is the foundation of all these disciplines, because wherever we go, there should be ethics, there should be principles that guide. even in my discipline, which they call psychology. We have a human functioning system which encourages that we take care of one another's wellness. I'm not talking about Western psychology, I'm talking about African psychology. And African psychology, which our parents and our foreparents practiced a long time ago, which our parents, even when they were land disposers, they still practice it. And African psychology, which begins in the morning when you say unjani. That is an epistemology of wellness and is part of the counseling. We come from communities of greatest counselors because you wouldn't leave your communities without your neighbors asking you, unjani mwebani namhlanje. And if you go to rural areas, you'll find unjani wakhona totally different from how we do it here. Unjani wakhona allows you ukuphalaza indlini, where you pour your soul out. That is lawfulness. You have law, you have imigaqo, which makes sure that you provide wellness to others. And you know that you are responsible for the healing of your neighbors, of your family, and of your community. It is this law that Utakumanisi is asking us today to remember. There's nothing special about Western education, comrades.
Yes.
They found us practicing these laws, and actually we lived longer when we practiced our own laws than we are. So we need our customs and the ways of our own, because everyone deserves an education which teaches her or him to exist in the world as themselves. We deserve education, our children deserve an education which tells them who they are, not how not to be yourself. The destitution of African people today is not ethically justified. If we had law, we wouldn't have our Despute right next to us. We have been poorer under Western education system than when we were self-educating. No one was made to rely solely on other people for existence. We were not made to rely on white knowledges. We cannot rely on white epistemology because they have nothing for us. We already have our own knowledges, our own knowledge. And when I'm saying that, I'm not saying we're incapable of learning from others. We've always been capable. My sister, Dr. Zodo Khadebe, likes to say, when Isimbuni city indugu enhle ingawulezizweni, it shows that we were a people who appreciated the beauty of others. We always took from others, but that has to be done in our own terms, not on the terms of others. You don't impose your knowledge. We get suspicious when we impose it. What is it that is so special that all of us must be like you? And none of us are incapable from learning from others. But this learning has to be a healing experience because, as I said, as African people, we are a people who must be in harmony with our rhythm. Our rhythm is the moon, is the sun, is the land we stand on. And our rhythm is with all the creatures that are on this planet. And another issue that Utakumanisi, what I'm trying to say here is that what is sitting in front of us is not something that has not been engaged with, meaning that it's our time to take action. Utakumanisi also spoke about publishing in an interview he did in the United States in the late 1980s. About publishing, Utakumanisi said, well, with our people, it's very difficult to publish what we write because it has to be approved by the government. We know that very well. So if the Department of Education feels that you are too good for your thing, they say, no, your book is not that good. So for one to be able to be a writer, you must try that the book you write fits the schooling system. You must write rubbish, let me say so. Not tell the truth about the situation, meaning that not to be political. If you want a book about poetry, you must write about the trees, rivers, and many sweet nothings. I think this is a fact we're facing today. You know, both reviewers 1 and 2 do not want the kind of work we do. They do not want the Africanized thinking. They want us to think from the West even when we talk African. That is why you have scary versions of Ubuntu today. Ubuntu that Udadu Ramosa says doesn't have either the people or the culture, Abantu or Isintu. What Udadu Manisi said reminds me of what one of our master students in the department said in June during a seminar. Vanessa said, what is even more sad is that she was born in the 1990s. She said, you have to play dead in order to get that PhD. And only afterwards you can start producing critical work. This is a sad reality, comrades. A reality that you and I as scholars need to make sure that we fix. Because it cannot be something that was commented decades ago and is still continuing now. Our children cannot play dead anymore. We have a duty as this current generation of scholars to stand up for the truth for which our ancestors were murdered. To reclaim umthetho kamthetho, which is Isintu. To reclaim our ways and customs, so that our children do not have to lower their very high African standards for people who only encountered knowledge 500 years ago. We need to act like sages that we've always been. And remember that sages do not learn from babies. Amaxhosa athi inkomo ayincane etholeni. A calf cannot feed from its mother. Let us return to the proper order, where the cows are actually feeding the cows. Israel too.
When I introduced earlier, I said to the audience, she's in another level. That is why when we requested somebody to open, I said, it is a spiritual issue. We want whatever and whoever can do that. Because we have those that are more spiritual and engaging than us. I don't want to spoil anything she said by repeating it. But I want to ask a very important question as we engage here. Why is it is only the Africans in the world that give their children to their enemies so that their enemies must educate them? Why is it that when you appoint more black academics in universities, in the law faculties, in social sciences, and in accounting sciences, African and European descendants behave like children who are spoiled and want their own universities and would not let you educate them as they have done to you over 500 years. Let us engage with the subject of decoloniality and ask ourselves the role of language in that process of decoloniality. In one of the interesting engagements we had at UNISA, some educated professor of many certificates and publications stood up in a meeting and said, African languages cannot be applied in the law. Wow. And other black people clapped their hands happily. So, I thought I would be silent and quiet, and the person in me would not let it slide. And I asked, because you do not speak any African language well enough, and in every village in this country, in Toyando, in Venda, in Kiani, in Bushbuckridge, in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Eastern Cape, in the Free State, traditional courts are conducted in African languages every day. What terms are they using? And have you interacted with them to understand? Or you only think legal jargon and literature is in English and Afrikaans, and therefore to conduct affairs of the law and education, you must do that in those languages.
Who want that?
I pause. Our next speaker shall come. Dr. Lichfield.
If it surprises you, Group Areas Act and Mixed Marriages Act was never about white men not wanting black men to marry their women.
Yes.
It was more about what they know, a truth called genetic annihilation. If we took a decision today and we said going forward every white woman in the world will only sleep with a black man, we shall annihilate the white race in a generation. And I can tell you, the only male of the three races that carries a sperm that is unchangeable is the black man. That's why the world hate them so much. I mean, my great-grandfather was white. That's why I'm a Lichfield.
Yes.
But he married an African woman in Namabusa. They had 14 kids. One of them, my grandfather, married a Swati woman too. They had my father. My father married a Swati woman too, Mama Madlamini. Look at me today. I'm so far from white. I mean, I can't claim whiteness even if my life depended on it. So that is an unchanging sperm. And of course, the African woman was the first woman on earth. So that is the womb that carries the center. Anyway, I never intended to say that. Please allow me to acknowledge the ancestors of this continent. So you know our spirituality is based on the elements of nature. So it's not even true that Africans don't love nature, we don't love animals. Because every African surname has an animal totem. And if you don't know your totem, you need to go and find it out today. Immediately you acknowledge it, you will see things will happen. So I know mine is from my mother's side. I couldn't have Lichfield anywhere. So allow me to acknowledge Elambo Mama Ozamini, Zugula Zeze Zagalobamba, Lavaka Zalbombo Excesetel. emalangeni langayizimvula emnyama esabe emafinyeni bona bayengoma buyelele. And then allow me ngoba ngishadile angithi masivuma abakhwenyana haridumela abakhwenyana sihlanganisa amadlozi. If you have not done that, please know that we are married but with ancestors that have not met. Maybe that's why your marriage is just married. Which means the Lichfield, the Zamini, the Tshabalala and the Ngwenya have become one because my husband is birthed by Mangwe. So allow me to acknowledge them also, O Tshabalala. You will see that Tshabalala and Zamini were brothers. So there's a Katefanayo, it's born, O Tshabalala, Tinkongo, Letin, Tetasemafane, that's their totem, Inkongo, Nivel, yes. Having done that, then I can proceed because this message is not mine and I normally carry a very difficult message. So if I don't ask them to soften your hearts, you will stone me before I finish. So that being out of the way, can we just do a quick exercise? How many people have read the history of Africa, even if it's a paragraph? Before 642, don't be quick. Before 642, Christians call it Anna Domina AD, we call it CE, the Common Era. How many people have read what happened in 1 CE in Africa? Look around the room, I want you to look around the room, look at each other. It's not to put anyone on the spot, it's to establish a fact. How many people, let's see, don't be ashamed. How many people have read us in 1 CE? That's before Muslims even descended on us because they came here was 642. Which becomes the difficulty for me. I was flying Egypt Airways and I'm looking at these Egyptians usurping the Kemetian culture. Everything is Arab. How can Egyptians have been Arab? Those pyramids were built before AD in BCE. They were not there. They came in 642. It's a fact of history. Now you see, because we don't read these things, you kept asking a question, why do we give our kids who are enemy to educate? I asked, why sends a lot? Me, I always say, why are we addicted to mediocrity? It's because we don't know who we are. How can you not have read your history before the colonizers came? So when you utter the term decolonization, what are you talking about? Because we are supposed to decolonize, to go back to what you were before you were made what you are. So forgive me then for some of the positions that I'm going to hold. Because some of us have bothered to study the history of Africa dating 165,000 years old. That's how far some of us have gone. The gender relations, the spirituality, the economy, the infrastructure. So I stand here in an unapologetic that honestly Africa is for Africans because Europe was Posthumous. They don't want us in Europe. People are drowning in the Mediterranean because Europe won't give a shit. That's us about them. But we must be made to care. Why? So, anyway, all those things went to my topics. This normally happens because there is so much Africans don't know about themselves. When you stand in front, the ancestors just want to, it's like we are a pressure release, we are just unleashed, so forgive me. The topic by right is 25 years and 62 years after, reflections on the agents, on the post-colonial states agents for real self-determination. Let's make it simple. We want to reflect on this thing called the post-colonial state. How post-colonial is it post-colonial? And what is freedom for Africans? How far can freedom be freedom in the conditions in which we live? That's what we're going to talk about. And we will do it in 4 sections. The first section will look at what, in general, what gives states agents in the world. Then we will see if it applies to Africans. And then the third part will say, how do we look today? And the last part obviously will be recommendations, what should have happened. So I'll try and be quick because I always have too much information to give and start a simple. Look, there is something called the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. We've all heard about it. It talks about 3 things. territorial integrity, the right to self-determination, and national sovereignty. What does territorial integrity mean? It means what America wants to do in what's the oil-producing country, Latin America, Venezuela. It means what America wants to do in Venezuela is actually unconstitutional, it's against the law, because they have a right to territorial integrity. You cannot invade a state. You cannot interfere in their right to self-determination. They can decide who they sell their minerals to. They can decide who they want to trade with. So it means every day we see that these three principles are being broken. Another part that gives state agents two pieces of legislation, because I'm talking to lawyers. It's called the International Convention on Civic and Political Rights. Another piece of legislation that gives states agency is called, again, an International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Again, it means neo-colonialism is unconstitutional because it's cultural colonialism. You don't have a right to colonize people culturally. Every human being has a right to their culture. And that includes spirituality too. So, if that's what gives all states international agency, does that apply to Africa? Yes. I'm going to shock you because I am going to talk about a man whom we also love, and we shall ultimately maybe realize that sometimes we need to interrogate the leaders that they are willing to teach us about. Why don't we learn most of people at university, but we learn about some people? We need to start asking these questions. Now, for us to answer if Africa has been given the same credence as other states in terms of these three principles, we need to go back to the very first country that became so-called free, which is Ghana. That's why we have 25 years and 62 years after. Ghana 1957. What happened with Nkrumah? Immediately, because Ghana was a colony, remember, there was no Ghana before. Ghana was formed. It's some white male slept somewhere, sipped on Coca-Cola, if it was there that time, and decided, I'm going to make Ghana out of this territory. Yes, it's an artificial birth. It's like a sperm donation. It's not a natural birth. So Nkrumah wants to take over this artificial insemination called Ghana, and immediately a territory, cocoa-producing territory of the Ashanti, say, we don't want to be part of Ghana, we want to secede. What were the Ashanti before Ghana became Ghana? Now I'm coming to you, my brother, your talk. You see, the Ashanti were a kingdom. How can you call the Ashanti a tribe, guys? Who came to Africa and downgraded nations to tribes? If Abatswana are a tribe, then Batabin Libakwena Libarolo within the Tswana are what? They are what? These are nations. The only reason you were forced to accept that they are tribes is because they were forcing you under one territory, under an artificial insemination of a Western birthed nation. So if they accept that you have 13 nations amongst you, they know that it gives you the right to self-determination, territorial integrity, and national sovereignty. So to take that away, they downgrade you into tribes. And we all agree, we are addicted to mediocrity. How can Amazulu with one king, there's one king, unashamedly traceable, how can they be a tribe, an ethnic group? How is Belgium a nation the size of Soweto, but Amazulu cannot be a nation in tribe? The Ashanti were big, guys. Ashantis were confederation, self-sustaining. They were nation. There's a lot of writing by white people themselves who say Ashanti could never have been an ethnic group, just like Baganda, just like Amazulu. Go and read these things. That's why I said, what do you read about Africa? Now they want to secede. Nkrumah agafuni, because Nkrumah had decided, and I'm sure you're going to stone me, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Nkrumah had decided that he wants an all-united African state because he wanted to be the president of that Africa. Just like Mandela, freedom in my lifetime. So even if I sell all of you out, I will be president because this freedom must come in my lifetime. Nkrumah did the same role. that's 1957. What happens in 1958? In 1958, he calls a meeting of who was so-called independent then. Look at the composition. Most of these people shouldn't even have been in that meeting because they are colonizers themselves. Those are the ones who were free. It tells you another story also about the West, who they wanted free first than actually sub-Saharan Africa. The people who attended the meeting who were then free was Morocco, Libya, Tunisia, Ethiopia, Sudan, United Arab Republic. They sit there and they decide national sovereignty, territorial integrity, right to self-determination shall not apply to ethnicities in Africa. It shall only be enjoyed insofar as it upholds the colonial borders and the colonial nation. This is in black and white. This is in black and white. They release a statement, that's 1958, to show you that Nkrumah knew what is right to do. In that same year, he attends another meeting of countries that were still struggling, mostly sub-Saharan now. It was called the All Africa People's Conference. The All Africa People's Conference saying we condemn unashamedly all colonial borders, they must fall. In the same year, he's released two conflicting statements with two groups. That's 1958. What happens in 1959? He meets with Secretary of Guinea. They release a statement that says, any African country that becomes free going forward shall only be recognized if it upholds the colonial borders. Please remember, colonial borders come with the colonial language.
Yes.
Don't make a mistake. It comes with the colonial economy too.
Yes.
That is why you have got Commonwealth, you have got Francophone, you have Lusophone, those were colonized by Portuguese and Spanish. And that's how our economies are ordered too. And if you think I'm talking rubbish, go check it yourself. It is cheaper to call Europe in Africa than to call another African country. What happens in 1960, we get another group, Amakatongese, the Katanga people of Congo. They also say, sorry Patrice, we hear your dream and all, and we are going to be very good neighbors. But Tina, we are not in the Congo. Tina, pre-colonially, we were a kingdom that's for next in Africans. So that's how we shall stay. What does Patrice do? He calls Nkrumah. Nkrumah say, don't worry, I'll call the UN. I'm recognized as an African statesman now, first country to take independence. He becomes a liaison between Nkrumah, all former colonizing nations in Africa. Guess what? He never had a single meeting with Amakatongese to say what actually is your problem. They discussed them. They talked about them. They never talked with them. And they go so far as Nkrumah giving a force of 20,000 young and fresh Ghanaian men to go and fight the Katongese in Congo, to force them to be part of the Congo. So sometimes when we talk, we shouldn't blame white people too much. Our leaders have sold us out and we celebrate them. That force is joined by 31 countries. At that time, the only countries that were free in Africa didn't even reach 10, so you can guess where the 31 countries came from. It shows you the level to which they wanted to go to make sure colonial borders are maintained. They passed two resolutions, because I'm talking to lawyers, I must mention them. 1960 Resolution 148 of the UN, 1960. Another one, 1961 Resolution 161. Those resolutions allow the UN to use force against any so-called ethnic group that wants to secede. So in essence, we shall uphold these colonial borders whether we like it or not. Because some of our leaders have participated in making sure they will. What happens in 1963? They release the Cairo Resolution. They meet again. And they say, they cement it now, that when the AU is formed, they released it again in 1964, OAU head of state. No African state shall be allowed to be free if it wants to balkanize. If Amazulu want to be a nation, excuse my language, but I'm known to just say a spade is a spade. Amazulu, in all fairness, can go fuck themselves because South Africa is more important than Amazulu. It's exactly what it means. Now, what happens? To show you that these are not ethnic groups, these are nations, because it cannot die. What happens? There's a territory I'm coming to now. There's a territory between Cameroon and Nigeria that has always been a source of conflict. Throughout that time, it was resolved now. Maybe 5, 6 years ago, I think. It's called the Bagasi Peninsula. Produces oil. It was under Nigeria. Cameroon wants it. Because Nigeria is got oil in the east anyway, I'm assuming that's Cameroon's argument. But Cameroon says this territory always belonged to Cameroon. You know, it breaks my heart because they take the case to the International Court of Justice, lawyers in the room. What do the International Court of Justice use to determine the territory belongs to whom? They use a treaty between the two colonizing forces, Germany and England of 1913. And they say the agreement between England and Germany about this territory was that it belonged to Cameroon, so it shall be taken and given back to Cameroon. Do you know the suffering that caused? Because it has always been Nigerian. Now, I've made about 3 conclusions which I was supposed to mention to you thus far. The first conclusion was that the nation state gets its breath and life from the United Nations statutes, and I mentioned them. The second conclusion is that colonial borders shall stand because the UN, where it is sitting, is mandated to use force against anyone who speaks the contrary. The third one is that whenever there's conflict of borders amongst us, we never go to before 642. It has never happened. That is why I have a problem even with the term Pan-Africanism. That's why I call myself an Afrocentrist. Because Pan-Africanism itself rose with a protest against colonialism. So it starts our history with colonialism. It does not go further. Now, that's another conclusion. What happens now in the 90s? Mobutu has been taken out of power. It comes back, the Katongezi struggle. They decide, okay, this time let's go to the ICJ, International Court of Justice. You know what the International Court of Justice tells them? It says after we deliberated, we actually realized that you guys have a right to self-determination if we look at your pre-colonial history. But you know what? If we grant you that right, we shall be against, they call it, the lawyers will tell us better, it's a Latin term, iuti possidetis, which means during any conflict, whoever is the victor of a territory stays with the territory when the war ends, unless there's a treaty to the contrary. Now, people, I know that Western Europe, when they deal with Africa, they are as vicious as vultures. If they are prepared to go to war to maintain colonial borders, you must ask yourself, how are these borders benefiting them? I've given you but a few examples of how the borders are benefiting them. Nothing happens in Francophone France unless Paris says yes, in case you are not aware. I mean, when Mugabe started his shenanigans about the land and whatever, and I'm not going to discuss Mugabe today, it's a topic for another day because it's mixed feelings for me. When he started taking the land and giving it, which was the first country to jump in Europe, those who watch the news, who jumped first? Was it Portugal? No, who jumped? Britain. Why? Because it's a former British colony. Because we are still ordered that way. I taught my daughter said to me, what do they speak in Cameroon? I said, you must never ask me that question again. Go to Google and say, who colonized them? When you find who colonized, you know what language they speak. It is outrageous, it is scandalous. This is mediocrity, guys. I shouldn't be standing here speaking English. I shouldn't. Because they don't stand in London and speak Zulu to themselves. Now, how has that affected us? These colonial borders, this colonial economy, these colonial languages, how do we look today? I'll be quick. It was a lengthy session, I'll try and summarize it. Here's the first way it affects us. Do you know that there is not a single economic policy in Africa that is made in Africa?
Yeah.
I'll say it again for those who didn't catch it. Thank you, EFF. There isn't a single economic policy in the 54 states that is made in Africa. Ayiko. All our policies are made through the IMF and the World Bank. It's a vicious cycle, and I'll tell you how the cycle operates. You see, because we don't own our economy, we live on borrowed money. When you borrow money, they then give you an economic policy. One, they want you to liberalize, meaning let European goods come almost for free, but your goods cannot go to Europe. I want you to run with that, especially Black Forum. I'm going to tell you something that will scare you. Then they tell you, sorry, we've signed treaties here with your initial leaders, Lauma, sell out Afile. Some of them, if they wake up, I think I'll shoot them again. They deserve to see where they are. That includes Mandela, by the way, just as a passing comment. When they give you these policies, this is how it affects us. When we pass the BEE law, you know what happened? Isn't it we all complain and we say, but why has BEE not worked? Why has BEE benefited few people? Why no, guys, let's inform ourselves. We passed the BEE law, and before it was even in effect, we were taken to court. There's a court called the Investor State Dispute Settlement Court. It takes place in New York, so they even take it away from your country. You shall travel as a government and go and be tried in the white man's land. ISDSC, Investor State Dispute Settlement Court, within IMF and World Bank. They took us to court, the Firelli brothers. It is said that they control at least 80% of the granite industry in South Africa. They have one of the companies called Finstone, F-I-N, and then Stone. They took us to court, they said, sorry guys, you want BEE, you want what? 30% local beneficiation. That is not an agreement we signed with the government of national unity. Mr. Mandela promised us that shit ain't gonna happen.
Yes, yes, we're listening.
Then we lost the case, in case you're not aware. We capitulated from 30% beneficiation to 2%. How far can we fall? Even the dark angels don't fall that low. And then we were still settled with some millions of pounds of settlement because we lost the case. Lawyers know if you lose the case, you are liable for Ibizani to pay the court. Yeah. So BEE came to a standstill. It went no further. This is what they do to us. How else has it affected us? You know, I'm going to tell you another thing that will shock you. By the way, please follow the Investor State Dispute Settlement Court. Putua, it is the #1 legal area in the world now. It's mega $billion. Lawyers have to go and defend these states, and I mean states have to pay, you know, it's not thousands of rands. What should have happened, you think? Given that, I think by now, people normally say, throw this water away because people say, Maiso hamba idumiso. If it's going to start, the sound is never this way. What should have happened in Africa, you think? I want you to close your eyes. Do me a favor, just close your eyes for a second. This is the final part now. These are the solutions. Just close your eyes a bit where you're sitting, work with me. Can you imagine if 642 with the Arabs never happened in Africa and there was no Islam in Africa? Imagine if 1400 had not happened and there was no Europeans and Christianity in Africa. How could Africa have turned? Imagine it in your head. You know, most of you, you've been sold a lie. You are told we were tribes running around widely, shooting each other, not liking each other. It is a normal process of human beings. Europe went through it, Asia went through it. It's called state formation. It's normal. Germany was never Germany. It was Austro-Hungarian, Prussia kingdom before. Bismarck is the one that made sure that they become what they are. It is normal. You can open your eyes. What was happening in Africa when they came? And please understand, North, East, South, and West Africa was at different stages in 642 AD. Even in 1400 when whites came, down south, we might have been the last to sort of civilize, because remember, I think my theory is that we were here, went up because Africa had no borders. When we came down in 180, the Great Bantu Migration, we were coming to what we knew. I refuse that we were coming to an unknown land. So because of that, we might not have formed into states. We were still fighting the Fakana, which is a normal process. People don't allow them to make it a hegemonic process. They've gone through it too. But if you go to the West, East and Central, they had already done their Fakana. As I say, the Yoruba were confederate. The Hausa, 13 states, each ruled by a female. They were called the Khabe warrior queens. They converted to Islam. The same Hausa people now want to stone the women in the marketplace. But they come from a kingdom of women. So imagine what would have happened in Africa if Christianity and Islam, through Arabization and Europeanization, have not happened. By the way, those two religions, you cannot embrace them unless you un-Africanize first. That's how they are. Just the truth. That's why you need to learn Arabic and you pray in Arabic and you get an Arab name. That's why you get a Christian name and you must do Raka Bashika and whatever. You must speak Hebrew, otherwise God can't hear you. And you can't be Togozile, you must remake the Hebrew. So it's a process of cultural oppression. It's against the very principle that we quoted of your right to your culture. If that didn't happen, what would have happened, do you think? Because I think Zulu people would still have been a great nation that coincides with Abatswana, that coexists with Abesuthu. And I think we would have done better. I'm almost at the end. I think we would have done better that way. Because can I tell you the truth? Me, I am so sick and tired. The African-speaking people in the room will understand me. I am heartful of the so-called ethnic wars in Africa. Because they aren't ethnic wars. It is nations crying from the womb, saying, what have you done to me? You've downgraded me to nothing. What have you done to me? It will not go away, people. You cannot ask Botswana not to be Botswana and be a South African. What is South Africa? A British creation, a dream. Nigeria was a dream of Lugard. You know, the first British colonial policy was written by Lugard. In fact, not written by Lugard, I'm wrong. It was written by A.J. MacDonald, who was a missionary. Writing it for Lugard, who was a politician. And in it, A.J. MacDonald says, go and get the book yourself. It's called Christianity, Trade and Politics. Even the name tells you that the two should be mixed. 1916. In it, A.J. MacDonald will look at, don't teach them God. You'll be making a mistake. They will fight you. They know God more than us. Make them forsake spirituality and give them religion. Ithi isinguni sithi ulahlekelwa into ekhona ngento engekho ulahlekelwa kisesinteni kasesinteni. That's what we did. Exchange spirituality for religion. Religion is an opium of the mind. There I agree with Karl Marx. Religion gives you, religion tells you will live better in heaven. How should I believe it if I don't see it now? That's my conclusion on the agency of the post-colonial state to really self-determinate, is that we never can self-determinate until we deal with colonial borders, we deal with the colonial language. And why are we so hard to convert Africans? You know, Swahili is the most widely spoken African language. And Tanzania has done it for us. We don't need to be going and reinventing our curriculum and whatever. Swahili in Tanzania is a technical and scientific language. Because they do everything in Swahili. English, they just learn as a language. We are refusing to adopt Swahili. There and then the ANC comes thinking we are fools. They think we are addicted to mediocrity like them. No, you can do Swahili as an option from grade 1 if you want. Who do they think they are fooling? Because if they are really intent on it, it should be compulsory. Imagine this, when my daughter was 13, she just turned 18 now. My daughter said to me, you know, if we took a decision from Cape to Cairo, every grade 1 child from next year shall do Swahili as a language. Do you realize in 12 years, that's how long schooling takes? In 12 years, we shall have produced the first breed of Africans that sit in a room like this and everything is running in African language. Not that it cannot be done. Our leaders don't want to because we are addicted to mediocre leaders. You know, now vote in South Africa, and I say that with pride. I don't know who to vote for. Even as an EFF MP, I had not voted because by the time they asked me to be an MP, elections were over and I had not voted. Because I don't know who to vote for. It's mediocrity. None of them gives you a radical thing that departs. Even EFF's radicalism does not take me to 165,000 years ago. Because there were systems in Africa, guys. Zethu, Professor Zethu, tried to tell you, just from a linguistic perspective, how rich the socio-political systems that were there are. Now, they are threatening me, so I will. And you see, because I'm a guerrilla, I want to work with threats, so I will succumb. Another thing we can never do if we want to decolonize and have real self-determination is to keep holding on to political parties. Guys, political parties next to Christianity and Islam are the most divisive thing to Africans. Political parties are at a point where if it's the ANC and the EFF say radical economic transformation, they oppose it because it's said by the EFF. If the ANC says we will give land away, the EFF opposing it because it's said by the ANC. So we stop being African, we become political parties. But here's another thing, guys. Give me just 2 minutes and I'll wind up. I have pretty much resigned myself to the fact that white Europeans have never given us anything that is medicine, that will make us heal, that will deliver us. If they are prepared to invest money to fight for democracy, it should tell you that democracy is nothing but crap. Does not exist. Democracy hasn't worked anywhere, including America and the West. I mean, do you think Trump asked American permission to invade the countries he invades or any other? Do you know, as a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you another thing that will shock you lawyers. America has been at war since 1946. 1 year after the Second World War. Please go and check it yourselves. They always have 1, 2, 3, 4 wars running at a given time. They've been at war since then. Against self-determination, against territorial integrity, against national sovereignty. So when we want to fight here, and you say it's my democratic right, can you even spell democracy? Do you know what that is? We are supposed to say that's my Afrocentric heritage right, not my democratic right. What rubbish is that? It hasn't worked anywhere. Trump went and reduced Iraq to an iron age based on a lie, weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. And you want to sit here and you want to convince me that there's something called democracy in the world. It doesn't exist. So we need to go back, and I think this would be my parting shot. Go and read about us, please. African Americans, not the ones you like. There's nothing wrong with them, you need them. Bob Marley says, excuse me, but I like my spliff. Oh God, I've got to take it easy. From reality, I just can't drift. Meaning that my life as a black man is so hard, I need ganja to cope from time to time to escape this reality. So, alright, abo Rihanna, Laben Batandayo, Nabo, Jay-Z and whoever, they help you escape your reality. But that's not who you must role model after. Go and look for Afrocentric, Pan-African Americans who've written about us more than we have written about ourselves. And read and see who we were, guys. You know, I'm finishing a book now that actually argues that patriarchy is learned behavior for African men. Because we don't come from patriarchal heritage. In Africa, there was never a gender war, there was gender job differentiation. But another thing that makes you see that we are mad. How can Ghana, Iolala, or March 1957, Ivuke on April 1957, and call itself a post-colonial state. When did you decolonize? How could we have slept on the 26th of April 1994 and wake up on the 27th day after and we are called a post-colonial state? Are we mad or what, Africans? Stupid, mad, mediocre, which one are we? Decolonization is a process. In fact, there's a woman, people, you know, and the ancestors just... See guys, there's an African-American woman, go and read her, I love her to bits, called Marimba Ani. She combines archaeology, anthropology, and sociology. I think psychology too, I'm not sure, but these three I'm sure. She's a professor now, and she's aging. I really wish to meet her before. I don't want her to pass out of this world. But Marimba Ani, the parents are Yoruba. Their father was African-American. She has given us a symbology about culture that keeps me awake at night. After I read that, I couldn't sleep, David. She says culture is to a people what the immune system is to the body. If your immune system, please don't be hypersensitive. I'm making an example because it is the nearest example. I'm not disrespecting people who are living with HIV and AIDS. If your body has been invaded by the virus of HIV, it doesn't matter if you eat carrots, you eat beetroot, you eat healthy, you exercise, you have to deal with the virus that is in your immune system. Confirm? Yes, otherwise it will deteriorate. And even if you are eating the carrot, the beetroot or whatever, you need to get a certain balance that boosts the immunity, because there are people who live without ARVs, but they have come to know what they combine, because at the end of the day, the virus must be tackled in the immunity. Otherwise, the body falls apart. She says, same thing with culture. If your culture has been intercepted through colonialism, and I'm doing my addition and saying through Arabization and Christianization, Europeanization, when the people leave, they don't leave because they suddenly woke up with changed hearts. I'm up to believe Khalid Mohammed. He says white Europe, he says white people. I'll be kind to white South Africans and say white Europeans, although it doesn't apply to them. White Europeans have found themselves to be so disagreeable on planet Earth. No person has ever been able to live with them. So when they left, it wasn't a change of heart. They left because they knew that their culture, which is the immunity of the people, has been so contaminated by the virus of colonialism. Even when they are born, the virus shall continue to colonize the people, which is what we call self-colonization. So until we deal with the aspect of culture, we can't go through a cultural revolution because we speak with a folk tongue. People say South African culture, and I say, what bullshit is that? There's nothing called South African culture. What is South Africa? It doesn't exist. And this name irritates me so much. I travel into Africa. Tunisia was my 30th African country that I've been to. When you tell people I'm come from South Africa, they say, yeah, we know, but which country? Can you fucking give a country the name of a geographic area? Even on Google, it irritates me to look for things about South Africa because it gives you Southern African statistics. Just to show that we actually don't exist. We are somebody's euphoria, somebody dreaming somewhere. So, can we deal with culture? But we can't deal with culture for as long as we continue negating who we were. For as long as you continue calling Amazulu, Nabatswana, and whoever tribes, we are going nowhere. Though because we are already within a nation, I call them nation groups. And in any case, no self-respecting African should be using the word tribe with a straight face. Please go and look at it. Tribe means people who are uncivilized, bastardized, whatever it is. Go and look at the definition. That's what they call us. They never call themselves tribes. But I am refusing even ethnic group, because for me, Abatswana are a nation. It is Batlaping, Barolong, and Bakwena who are the ethnicities within Abatswana. So we will never go through a cultural revolution for as long as our self-determination, territorial integrity, and national sovereignty is based on maintaining colonial borders. Because colonial borders is this thing that confuses us. Nigeria does not exist, are you aware? Nigeria has got 3 wars, as you and me sit here going on. There's a war in the east of people who are fighting because their territory was polluted by oil. You have the Igbo fighting their old war cessation, and then you have Boko Haram because they feel that they are Muslim. And if you're asking me, and I say it even to Nigerians, for Nigeria to come right, it must break apart. Because read the pre-colonial history of Nigeria. Nigeria contains within itself at least close to 100 kingdoms that existed in Africa at the time. And I'm talking about the real established